ever sat down with your pastel pencils or your graphite pencils and felt just that little knot in your stomach? You know, that one that whispers to you, don't mess this up. Trust me, you are not alone. I think every artist, no matter how many drawings they've done, feel that tiny little bit of fear every now and again. In fact, it's one of the biggest things that holds so many people back from even picking up a pencil in the first place. So today I just wanted to sit down and share some gentle reminders and practical tips just to help you let go of that fear and fall in love with the process, whether that be your smudges, your crooked lines, and all. Now, one of the most freeing things I remind myself when I feel that little perfectionist voice that starts to creep in is that it's just paper and pigment. That's all it is. No matter how precious a piece feels, you can always start again. And every single bad drawing teaches you something that you just can't learn any other way. Now, when I was starting out, I'd spend ages sometimes just staring at that blank piece of paper, and I was scared to make that first mark because I didn't want to ruin it. But you know what ruins it more is not starting at all. So the next time you catch yourself just hovering nervously, take a deep breath and remind yourself that you can always grab another sheet of paper and start again. Now, one of the simplest ways to feel a bit safer as you draw is to build up your marks slowly. Now, I always encourage my members to think of those first layers. You want to be mapping out your shapes and placements without any pressure to be perfect. Now, in pastel work, this means gently blocking in those basic colors and then lightly sketching out where their darks and your lights will go. And with graphite, it's more about your initial outlines and the tonal values done with a light touch so that they're easy to adjust. Now, this approach gives you so much more freedom to correct as you go, and it's amazing how confident you'll feel once you see your drawing starting to take shape bit by bit. Now, another one of my non-negotiable habits is that I always have a scrap of the same paper that I'm using sitting next to me. And before I'll commit to a color or a shading intensity, I'll test it on that scrap of paper. Now, it only takes a second, but it can save you so much heartache later, especially when you're working with pastels, where it's a little harder to erase if you've lain down a darker color in the wrong spot, for example. Now, beginners often skip this step because it seems unnecessary, but trust me, once you get used to testing your pencils first, you'll feel so much braver about actually layering on your actual piece. Now, looking at a whole blank page can feel overwhelming, especially if you're tackling a really detailed animal portrait. Now, one of my favorite ways to combat this is to break your drawing into sections. Now, for example, if I'm drawing a wildlife portrait, or a pet portrait, I'll start with the eyes because they're my favorite part. And getting them right early on just helps me build confidence for the rest of the piece. Now, once the eyes are done, I'll sometimes move on to the nose and then I'll work the fur around the face and so on. And focusing on just one small area at a time keeps things feeling more achievable and gives you little wins along the way. Now, sometimes fear and frustration can creep in when we've been staring at a piece for too long. And the more we look, the more we see mistakes and things that nobody else would probably even notice. Now, when that happens, the best thing you can do is just take a break. Make yourself a cup of tea, stretch your legs, or better still, leave it overnight. Seeing your work with fresh eyes often reveals that it's not nearly as bad as you thought, and it helps you spot areas to refine with a clearer head. Now, one of the best mindset shifts I've learned is to see those so-called mistakes as opportunities. You know, some of my favorite effects in fur or backgrounds has come from either an accidental smudge or an unexpected pencil mark that I decided that I'd work into the piece rather than try and erase it. So the next time something goes slightly off course, pause before you reach for your eraser. Ask yourself, can I work with this? Could this add texture or interest? And you'll be surprised how often a mishap becomes a feature. Now, here's something practical I wish more beginners did. Don't throw away your old practice pieces. It's so tempting to just crumple them up in frustration, but trust me, keep them somewhere safe. Then every few months, pull them out and compare them to what you're drawing now. Because seeing how far you've come is the biggest motivation boost, especially on those days when you feel like you're just not improving. And plus, you can rework old pieces. I'll often reuse the practice pieces of paper for my color swatches or for just some little testers and warm-up sketches. Now, we live in a world where it's easy to compare ourselves to others, but nothing is polished and perfect. Art is messy, it's experimental, and it's deeply personal. Now, your goal shouldn't be to avoid mistakes altogether, but to get so comfortable with them that they don't derail your joy of actually drawing. Each line, each smudge, each sort of oops moment is part of your unique artistic journey. And people love to see your journey. Sharing your first attempts and then your improvements helps inspire others to pick up their pencils too. And remember, the best part about art is the art you actually do, not the art you're afraid to start. So grab those pencils, take a deep breath, and just have some fun.